Welcome to the Crittenden Press local news conference on the COVID-19 coronavirus. Today's news conference is brought to you by Tom Potter. He's your local State Farm agent in Crittenden County. And State Farm is the largest property and casualty insurance provider in the country. And if you need to get a quote or if you have an insurance question, call Tom at 965-2284 here in Marion. Today's guests on our news conference, Superintendent Vince Clark, County Judge Executive Perry Newcomb, and Emergency Management Director Chuck Hoover, who is also a Crittenden County Deputy. So we're going to get some insight from all of these guys today. We're going to start with Superintendent Clark. I know you've just been on the conference call with the governor, and I understand we have some new news about schools.
We do, Chris, and we did just talk to the governor on a conference call, and our education commissioner, and our PR director, Tiffany Blazina, is typing up a message right now to communicate to all folks. That will be going out any minute now. But we'll go ahead and say this for our community and our staff and students. The governor has recommended the school closure to continue through Friday, April the 17th. So what that means is next week was already part of the closure, which is 5 days of NTI days. So the following week, March the 30th, will be 5 NTI days in addition. And then the week after that will be spring break, which we will not do NTI days that week. And then we'll come back the week after spring break and have 5 more days of NTI. And that will get us through the recommended April 17th closure. And I'm sure at some point during that week or before, we will evaluate the situation and make a determination about what happens next.
Well, I understand also earlier today the governor made some other announcements, and it may have been late yesterday, but so he went ahead and canceled, or actually the president done away with the standardized test requirements this year, so you will not be doing any of those testings the way I understand it. And then there were some other issues about locally your class trip, the junior class trip is off now to Washington D.C. as well as what any news on any of the sporting events?
Well, I mean, we just got this information, and the way that I understand it, he didn't talk in detail about it, but you know that the Kentucky High School Athletic Association implemented a dead period for spring sports through April the 12th. So I am assuming that will continue another week.
What about school districts? I mean, we're very fortunate. We're a little bit ahead of the game having this NTI already set up. We've been using it for over a year now, a couple of years. I believe we've had it for snow days. Is where it's commonly used. But now it's really coming into play, and some school districts don't have this. What's going to happen there? I assume we'll continue to get credit even if we had to be out till the end of the year. Yeah. What about those other
That's
districts?
Exactly correct, Chris. I mean, that's one of the advantages of us being ahead of the curve in that we were already approved for 10 NTI days for this school year. We have implemented strategies to engage kids through our Chrome Classroom and our Google Meet platforms. Where we can do video with kids. Staff can videotape lessons and send those out to kids. They can do feedback. I know my middle school principal did a professional learning community collaboration with our 8th grade team this week. So it does do that. Now, what we understand at this point, there was probably 60 to 75 school districts in Kentucky that did not have NTI. They all have been granted emergency waivers on that. Their boards have approved that, and now all 172 school districts do have the NTI option and have implemented that for us. The thing now that we'll be looking at is getting waivers for the required, hours of instruction by legislators and possibly minimum instructional days.
I will vouch for the fact that the children at home, at least at my home, say that they have more classwork than they commonly do at school. So you're holding the teachers accountable, and as I assumed you would, and I think I've even heard the same out of Livingston County that so they're making sure they're getting their work done too.
Yeah,
So,
and that's a contrast between our NTI previously, where you have a couple days of snow days, or ice. You have a couple days off. Now we have just we sent the kids out with 2 weeks of work. And I think it's our advice to parents and students is take that day by day, because looking at that as a 2-week chunk of learning is a lot to absorb. So we do have time. All this is married up to spring break now as well. We hope kids got outside and played today. We had good temperatures and a sunny day. Tomorrow it's going to be cool in the morning, but sunny tomorrow. Get out and play. Emotional health, physical health is important, that they have a balance and continue to have a schedule and stick to it as possible.
and I assume the feeding program will go on as long as school's out.
As long as we have an NTI day, we will continue the feed.
Okay. Chuck Hoover, as I mentioned, who is the Emergency Management Director for Crittenden County, as well as a Crittenden County Deputy. Chuck, it's part of your responsibility to keep up with the number of these tests that are administered here for the virus, and to make these reports, I assume, when we have one positive. Can you update us on what the situation is here now?
Sure, Chris. The most recent data we have is from 4 p.m. Our time yesterday. That's passed down through the state government. There are 47 cases statewide. There's been 639 tests. Of those, 3 were in Crittenden County. We've got 3 tests out. The first test result is back. It is negative. The last 2 results are still pending. I got word from the hospital CEO this morning that the test results could be extended out as much as 8 days, so we may not know an answer to those most recent 2 tests for another 5 or 6 days. His concern is to make sure that everybody is practicing good hygiene, that they're remaining calm, and that if you do need to go seek treatment, if you feel like you're showing symptoms of this virus, that you go contact your primary care providers. They ask that you go to ky.gov, get information from them, that there's a 1-800 number set up through the state. It's the COVID-19 virus hotline.
That number, let me interrupt, that number is posted on our website prevalently at the top of the page.
It is. And they ask that you call that before you go to your doctor or show up at a hospital ER, and that you kind of answer their questions. That will help them decide whether or not you do need to go. Once there, you're also spoken with the local health department. They have a handful of tests. The hospital has a handful of tests, but they're being reserved for those that meet all the criteria. They're not going to be testing everybody that comes to the door saying they want a test. So if you are not truly sick and you don't meet that criteria, don't expect to get tested for coronavirus.
I've heard a lot of chatter and read some stuff on social media that about questioning why clinics do not have these private clinics. So that answers part of that, is they really need to control, because the numbers of the tests are so low right now.
Correct. The federal government has relaxed some of the restrictions on these labs that are making the tests, and they're trying to push more of those out to the states. Unfortunately, we're a small community and we don't have the population that requires a large number of tests. That's why we say, if you're not sick, if you don't feel sick, if you don't meet the criteria, don't swamp the doctor's offices or ER, because they are not going to be able to handle it. They're not
Which
going
is
to be able to see you.
one of the greatest concerns right now nationwide, is that we're going to be overwhelmed in the healthcare sector. Yeah.
The resources right now are a concern, and we want to make sure that the people that actually need the treatment can get the treatment, and that room, that hospital room or that doctor's office exam room, is not being taken up by somebody needlessly.
Mm-hmm. Judge Newcomb, I understand there's some changes as far as the courthouse and some edicts from the governor about how you can must handle things now. So it's not, we're past the suggestion mode, and now we're into mandates, right?
Yes, absolutely, Chris. First part of the week we received notice that we were going to have to close to public access to all governmental buildings and facilities, which we did. We went on lockdown. Our employees were still coming into work, still handling requests from clients and customers, if you will. And we were doing that we had our phone numbers posted at the door. Someone could come up, call the office what they needed documentation from or needed to conduct business with, and we would either accomplish that and bring it to the door to you, which I was referring to it as a curbside service, so to speak. And then we had actually allowed attorneys to come in to conduct title work to try to get some of these title loans and things through that people were waiting on, trying to accomplish that. That worked good through yesterday, and then at 7:42 last night, the governor sent out notification that all in-person services through government office buildings would cease immediately. And so this morning we posted a new note on the door and asked people to continue to call our offices, continue to call the respective office that they needed to deal with, and everyone is doing the best they possibly can to make arrangements to continue to conduct business either by mail, by fax, by email, whatever the case might be, that will allow us to continue to serve our public.
Mr. Clark, I know part of this tragic situation is that there's some really unfortunate stories, and one of them I heard that the foreign exchange students had to be sent home, and that's a once in a lifetime type situation, and I know that's a tough decision has to be made, but also a lot of these students may miss a quarter of this particular whatever academic year they're in.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, and that's what that's the next thing that we have to prepare for is the lost learning, evaluating on that. Nothing can replace that classroom time with a certified teacher in there in a regular school day, and we're grateful that we have the NTI options. We're grateful that we have the Chromebooks and the technology to engage kids. But just the impact on learning and the opportunities to extend learning is concerning, and then it will play a role in what we do next. But up for the upcoming school year or whenever we do have an opportunity to return. I think the other thing too, though, is that a lot of times during these times of crisis, we discover things. We learn new ways to do our craft, and I'm seeing teachers engage more in technology. They're embracing the apps in different ways to communicate, collaborate, challenge kids to be problem solvers and critical thinkers. But then you lay all that over the need for us to be good citizens as well. And here's the opportunity for us. I keep thinking about the spring breakers in Florida. I don't think they're being good citizens because they're in a state that have a lot of folks that are retired. And I compare that to here is that we have a role to protect our parents and our grandparents and our older generation here as well. And so I think there's lessons to be learned in that.
I know it's hard to plan a month down the road because we don't know what this is going to look like tomorrow. But I hear a lot of concern about prom and graduation, and here we know now school's going to be out a few more weeks at least. Have you thought any into that? Is there anything at this point to solidify, or you just wait and see?
Well, definitely we have started conversations because it's on our principal, it's on our high school leadership mind. It's on the kids' mind. They're talking about it. We have staff members that have kids that are seniors, and we got spring sports season that we would like to salvage in some form or fashion. you mentioned prom and graduation week and things like that. And we're resolved to do whatever we can to capture those moments and those events for our kids. It may look very different than what it has in the past, but even if we have to go into June and do some things differently for those kids, I think our people are not going to be satisfied or happy just to say, well, it's just not going to happen, because around here that's not how we do business. But it may look differently, and it's hard to say what that would be at this point. But we would certainly like to preserve those events. The timeliness of them may be different. The kind of the environment may be different. I'm not really sure at this point. Our people have started that conversation though.
Well, I remind everyone too that the governor has closed any non-essential business, and there's a list online of essential businesses that are critical: food processing, agriculture, manufacturing at this point, construction, trash collection, pharmacy, all the healthcare, and insurance. And I will remind you that Tom Potter, your local State Farm agent here in Marion, and who serves Crittenden County, State Farm is the largest property and casualty insurance company in the United States. If you have any questions about your insurance at this point, or want to discuss, you've got some downtime maybe if you're sitting around the house and you want to discuss any other options, call Tom at 270-965-2284. We appreciate Tom Potter, your local State Farm agent, for sponsoring today's press conference. Judge Newcomb, I have heard a lot of stories around the community, as you can imagine. I get a lot of emails, hundreds a day now. So in going through them, some of the things that have struck me is, and I've confirmed them here, is guns and ammo are flying off the shelves. Even in Kentucky, where you think 9 out of 10 are armed already. But I talked to Britt Hodge down at Hodges Sports and Apparel, and she said the distributors are out. They're running out of ammunition, everything. Does that strike you as odd, or do you see a reasoning, a logic behind that?
I would hate to venture a guess. I suppose at the reasoning in my own mind, I would think perhaps maybe the reasoning for the ammunition is that if this thing continues to go further and further out and linger on and on and on, how it could affect the transportation of our food stocks and produce and those type things. You mentioned farmers and agriculture are still able to conduct business and still able to transport products. Grocery stores are still able to be open. And of course, a part of the thinking in my mind with respect to ammunition is, if I can't buy hamburger meat or chicken at the grocery store, maybe I can at least go out in the woods and harvest a deer or a turkey or something to help feed my family. I don't know, unless it's just pure fear over the fact that they may eventually shut down manufacturing and maybe not be available. So, those are some options I think that could be for consideration. Main thing is, we just don't want a panic or a scare and unnecessary purchasing of those items, like anything else, and hoarding those up only create a ripple effect to compound the problem more and more exponentially. So I think if everybody would take heed and continue to conduct business on an as normal basis as possible, I think we can get through this. It's like Mr. Clark mentioned. Everything's going to look a little different probably. It's going to be accomplished in a little different manner, perhaps. But moving forward, I think we can all get through this thing. The governor is stressing in every news conference he has, work as Team Kentucky, and that means everybody, every citizen, every school administrator, every teacher, every law enforcement officer, every first responder. We all need to be working together at this time and not necessarily looking out for oneself.
Chuck Hoover, our emergency management director, and as I mentioned, also a sheriff's deputy. Chuck, is there anything else you anticipate or that you, maybe in your discussions with authorities throughout the state, anticipate maybe tightens down even more? I don't know how we get a whole lot tighter on some things, but the parks are still open. The park at Marion Crittenden County Park was full today. Restaurants are currently able to, no dining in, but there's carry out and delivery. And I understand now they'll even, if they are in a wet county and serve alcohol, they can even bring you the alcohol now. So they're really getting relaxed to allow these restaurants to find some way to survive. But is there anything that you see maybe coming down the road that you give us a heads up on?
Not in particular, no. They're rolling out new restrictions and new executive orders from the governor's office every day. That's to be expected as the cases in Kentucky kind of ramp up. They're doing that as a hedge against further cases, and I would agree with that. The least restrictive we can be is the best option. However, when people don't use common sense or they begin to hoard things like toilet paper and things like that, then those restrictions are put in place by our government, and that is unfortunate. I think if people use common sense, practice good hygiene, we'll get through this in a pretty reasonable amount of time. I don't see any real outlandish indicators from state government or from the federal government. I've heard rumors of martial law and they're going to shut down cities and things like that. Nothing like that has come down the pike. That's not to be said that they don't plan for that, because that's their job in government. That's my job in my role as emergency manager, is to plan for those eventualities. We all hope they don't come to pass, and we don't believe they will. But that is part of the responsibility of being a good citizen of this state and doing your part. Like I said, practicing clean acts, good hygiene, taking care of your neighbors, checking on the most at risk in our population, working together, and we'll get through this as fast as we possibly can.
I want to remind our viewers again that today's news conference is brought to you by Tom Potter, the local State Farm agent. State Farm is located just down the street from the school on Gum Street. State Farm is the largest property and casualty insurance provider in the United States. Call Tom Potter today for any of your questions about your current policy, or if you're interested in discussing a new insurance policy. I'm going to give each of you 2 or 3 minutes here if you would like to kind of wrap up things for today. And as I mentioned last week when we had a news conference last Friday, we'll continue this as long as it's warranted. And I think as much as things are changing, we will continue to do this. Mr. Clark, anything particular in conclusion here today?
Well, what I've told my people, my message has been through this, is we're going to try to do 3 things. We're going to try to extend and continue learning for our students. We're going to try to feed kids, and we're going to try to take care of each other and ourselves. Those are the things that we're going to practice. We're going to commit to here. And with that being said, I do worry about all folks, our students, our staff, our parents, our families, as we become more isolated and we have less and less social interaction, about the emotional health of folks. And I want to encourage folks to make a schedule, put time in that schedule for learning, but put time in there for each other and checking on neighbors. Want to make sure that, if you're feeling anxious, to use those breathing exercises that they've been taught. The importance of exercise and stretching, and make sure that's part of your daily routine, because I think our emotional health is going to play a big role in how this thing unrolls. I'll just remind folks again, the governor is, we will follow the governor's recommendation to extend the closure through Friday, April the 17th. So next week is already an NTI week. It was determined last week to do that. So the week after that, which is the week before spring break, will be 5 more days of NTI. Our teachers will be working on those lessons next week, and we'll have to figure out how to get those to our students. For the week of March the 30th, we'll have a week off, spring break, and then then the week after spring break will be 5 more days of NTI, and I'm sure during that week or sometime before then, the governor and the leadership team will evaluate what happens next.
Judge Newcomb, anything particular with regard to the whole county?
Yeah, just keep in mind that we're going to continue to provide service. Again, as I mentioned earlier, it's going to be a little different. Things are going to operate differently, but we're going to continue to operate to provide services that we have to provide for everyone. We're going to keep safety and health at the forefront of everything we're doing with respect to how we handle situations. Be prepared if you have to call for first responder issues. You're probably going to be asked some questions. Do you have fever? Have you been in contact with somebody out of the country? Do you have a cough, flu-like symptoms, pneumonia type symptoms? Those things are going to come. So just be expecting that and be patient with that. But everyone's going to continue to respond. Everyone's going to continue to help those that need help. We've been hearing a lot about Italy and comparison of our country to Italy and what's happened there. And I've been trying to remind everyone to take a look at Italy. I mean, they're half the size of Texas basically in land mass, yet their population is about 3 times as much. So they can't achieve the social distancing that we can achieve. Some of those type things that will help offset this virus in our country, I think more than others that you will see. But we've all got to remain cognizant of that and try to achieve that whenever possible, and be aware that that's just a part of today's protocol as we move forward.
And I will advise you that many of our viewers have commented that it doesn't appear that you three are exercising social distancing protocol. So some things are necessity outweighs the risk, I think, right?
That's true.
Chuck, I'll let you make your closing comments, but I want to say this. In spite of all this, hope remains. And I say that because in front of my office today, the Conservation District was giving away free seedlings, free treelings, seedling trees. And it was packed. So there is hope for the future.
That's absolutely correct. Like we've said, we're going to get through this. It's just a matter of time. This is an unprecedented situation that we're dealing with, so we're having to take some unprecedented measures. And it might be tough for a little while, but we will get through this together. Practice the good hygiene, social distancing, and what's helping more than anything is checking reputable sources for the information that you're getting. Facebook is great, but you need to go to respected sources on Facebook. I recommend going to the press website, their Facebook page, cdc.gov for any hand washing, hygiene questions like that. They update their guidelines. Here lately it's been daily as to their recommendations on social distancing, things like that. And then for more local stuff at state level, ky.gov, they have a link to the Kentucky COVID-19 site that they've established that has the updated numbers that they put out daily at 4 p.m. our time. If you're curious about the number of cases in the state, you can go there and track that down yourself. And then, like I said, the press website for our local information. Chris, you've been great about helping us get the word out, and I know you'll continue to do that. And so the citizens, we ask that you just check those sites. Trust, like Ronald Reagan said, trust but verify. Okay, you can take somebody's word for it, but go ahead and do the double check yourself before you start spreading false information. I'm confident in the citizens of this county, and I know they're going to do a good job. I know we're going to come together and we're going to get through this.
Well, thank you. And we do try to verify anything before we put it on. I appreciate that plug and the respect from you for that, Chuck. And speaking of plug, I want to plug our today's sponsor, Tom Potter. He is the local State Farm agent. Insurance has been deemed one of the essential or critical businesses that may remain open. So Tom is there and his staff ready to assist you with whatever your insurance needs are at this particular time. Claims, or if you want to talk about new products, call Tom at 270-965-2284. We appreciate today's panel, Superintendent Vince Clark, Judge Executive Perry Newcomb, and our Emergency Management Director, Chuck Hoover. Thank you guys, and again, possibly next week. We appreciate today's sponsor, Tom Potter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.